Welcome to Chamber Talk. I'm Andrew Gregson, and today we've actually got Dr. Nefta Pareda from Radiant Futures here. Thank you very much for coming here today.
Oh, my pleasure to be here.
So a couple of months ago, we did interview the CEO, Mark Lee, and obviously you're coming here today to talk to us about the Human Trafficking Awareness Month, which is this month. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, it's January.
And so for the audience, do you mind giving us a little bit of a rundown about what that is before we talk about some of the events you've got planned?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me here. So Human Trafficking Awareness Month is a national campaign. And even in other parts of the world, so it's also an international campaign where the goal is to raise awareness about the different forms of human trafficking that exists throughout the world and how it's interconnected throughout the world. So Radiant Futures, as an agency that serves survivors of both domestic violence and human trafficking, we take the month of January to have a series of events throughout the community, throughout Orange County, that really give out some statistics and awareness so that we're aware of how prevalent human trafficking is, not just globally, not just in the state, but also within our own county.
Now, we hear a lot about, like, it's spoken about human trafficking. We hear about it a lot. It's on programs, it's on Netflix, it's everywhere, right?
Right.
What does it really mean at a local level to Radiant Futures? What's it really mean to you guys?
So human trafficking is divided up, or we categorize human trafficking in two major kind of forms of human trafficking. There's sex trafficking, which is probably what we're all mostly familiar with, what we hear about in the stories and in the media. And there's also labor trafficking. And labor trafficking includes trafficking people for work. It includes indentured servitude, et cetera. And what we do is we work with survivors that are looking to escape the life of being trafficked. So whether they are sex trafficking survivors or they are labor trafficking survivors, it's people who are looking for a way out, and we provide shelter and therapy to help them process through what they've experienced, education, personal empowerment, resume building, skills building, etc. as well. There's a large overlap between domestic violence and human trafficking. And so a lot of survivors of human trafficking, sometimes because of the way they've been brought here or the way they've either been sex trafficked or labor trafficked, don't have access to their own documents, don't have birth certificates, don't have driver's license, don't have an identity here. And so we help to build them up to either have them return to where they need to return to, or to start living a life of independence and freedom here.
Now, you know, it's not easy, but it sort of is. It's easy to talk about it, and I appreciate you explaining that. But for the individual who's going through this, it's not as easy as saying, oh, I just reached out, right? Could you share a little bit to the audience about maybe the struggles that individual may come across as they're trying to get help or get out of what's going on?
Thank you. Yeah, I will. So, I really like the way you pose the question, because, you know, we talk about, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just,
why don't you just call someone?
Yeah. It seems like it's so easy. There is a level of coercion and psychological, I don't want to say brainwashing, but there's this constant, I mean, when this is the world, you know, and now you're trapped in this world, the ability to leave and saying, well, who am I going to call? Who am I going to go to? Where am I going to go? That becomes increasingly difficult. And if you don't have resources, you don't have a bag, you don't have an ID, you don't have any money,
right?
Where is it that you are actually going to go? And who's going to
listen to you?
Yeah, who's going to listen to you? Who's going to believe you? Who's actually...
Who can you trust?
Who's going to take you long term?
Right.
I mean, because you can flee, and the traffickers...
they'll go get you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah. And they can seek you and find you and make you return.
Right.
And there's also threats of, well, you know, you're doing this for... So there's also physical threat. If you leave, then no one will ever find you again. And when it's someone who has consistently and repeatedly hurt you, that becomes believable. And to a certain extent, it is believable because it does happen. People do try to flee, don't end up anywhere, and end up missing. And so in all of that, it makes it really difficult. So when someone actually is able to flee, like when we also provide shelter services. So when someone flees, one of the first things to do is we identify who were the people involved. If law enforcement needs to get involved or law enforcement gets involved, we provide the information to law enforcement. We work really closely with them in human trafficking cases. If restraining orders need to be put in place, then we make sure that happens. A lot of survivors also have children of their own, so they also have to think about their children as well. So whether you're either being sex trafficked or labor trafficking, it's not just, I'm not just going to get up and go. Like I have a 4-year-old and I have a 13-year-old and I need to make sure that they're being looked after too. Or the trafficker says something like, well, if you leave, you're never going to see your kids again.
Right.
And so there's just all of these, concerns that come with it. It's not easy to just pack up and leave. For you and I can't just pack up and leave and move to another state without having my affairs in order, so to speak.
Right.
And if I don't even have access to a public domain to get my affairs in order, well, I'm never going to leave where I live either.
Right.
So it's the same thing, but with a lot less resources. And that's why people don't just get up and leave.
And go. And how common is it really? The whole trafficking business?
Well, some, and statistics are always, difficult to pinpoint down because a lot of it goes unreported. But what we can say is, so like in Orange County, for example, there was 500 cases of human trafficking that were identified and prosecuted. But
that's all that you know of.
That we know of, right. But some places like the World Health Organization or other nonprofits, local and global nonprofits, identify California and even Orange County as one of the principal places where human trafficking survivors pass through. Now, some stay here, but the volume of survivors that pass through Orange County is astounding. And the reason why I say pass through is because, like in sex trafficking, for example, the survivors will be set up in a certain place for a certain amount of time, and then they will be moved, and then they will be set up in another place. And some of us might have ideas of where human trafficking places regarding sex trafficking might happen within Orange County, right? Like someone say, "Oh, I know that this area has, there's lots of human trafficking probably happening there or in these motels." But survivors will stay only for a short amount of time, and that's kind of by design. Human trafficking is a global enterprise. It's very lucrative, like the selling of guns or drugs, except the survivors are reusable. And so it's almost this endless supply of money. So there's a huge empire that's built around human trafficking.
And when you say, they're passing through, are they being put to, it's for slavery, really, isn't it? Are they being utilized, working at that time, or is it they're just using them to get to the net because they've got an end goal and they're just pottering along so they don't get caught? I mean, what's the point of
moving them over? Yeah, a lot of it is trying to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Okay. So like we work closely with law enforcement, and like different police departments know, and they identify hotspots, and they identify individuals. Right. And so they're trying to move them to move the locations, move the places, so that they can continue to exploit. Right. Either in labor, like in factories, or in indentured servitude, or in sex trafficking, which is the most prevalent form of human trafficking, and the one that's also probably most visible. Like we don't see what happens behind closed doors in factories and businesses, but we do see, we see survivors of human trafficking walking the streets at night, or we see them trying to soliciting sex. Right. And so sex trafficking becomes prevalent. And then a lot of us, we have eyes like, oh my gosh, they look extremely young, or they look blah, blah. And sometimes we might say things like, well, it's their choice. It's their choice. But a lot of times, it's not. There are conditions, environmental, social, economic conditions that led them there. They were also primed and groomed to become survivors. And then once you get caught up in the life, then that becomes the only thing you know, and that makes it that much harder to break out of.
Now, would you mind maybe clarifying, because I can only imagine that this isn't all coming on, that it's coming through different borders. It must also happen internally, just like we have terrorism internally or externally. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the fantastic things from a media perspective that has been happening is shining lights on human trafficking and that it actually exists and it's global. So we have, popular movies that have been coming out and celebrities talking about it. And so we are starting to get this sense that human trafficking is happening. I think one of the shortcomings is that it's portrayed as a border issue. Is the border issue part of human trafficking? Well, sure. Absolutely. People are, the borders are political lines and trafficking is human lines. And so you cross them because that's just what happens. But more realistically, the majority of, human trafficking survivors, I don't want to say the majority.
A big chunk.
Right. It is local and it is groomed. And there's a significant, there are different populations that are considered at risk for becoming survivors of human trafficking.
Okay.
And so those populations include undocumented individuals. Mm-hmm. So people that are already here, and don't have access to a lot of the things that some of us who are here legally might be able to have.
Okay.
Foster youth and former foster youth. So foster youth ages 18 to 25. That's one of the biggest high risk populations for human trafficking, especially young girls that are in the foster care system or have aged out of the foster care system with limited resources, limited supports, and American born and raised, so to speak, but just going around. So it really is about the social economic factors that exist. So if there's poverty, if there's history of violence or substance abuse, history of trauma, history of sexual assault, and that is prevalent across all ethnicities and all socioeconomic classes. And so because of that increases people's risks for becoming human trafficking. There are a number of good, TED Talks, actually, and individuals who are human trafficking survivors, where they say stories about how they didn't even know that they were human trafficking survivors until it was too late. It was really slow. It was a boyfriend and I was in college and things were great. And then we started doing some things. And then he said, well, then let's videotape this. And then he started, well, now, just go out and get sex for money. And otherwise I'll share this video with the world or something along those lines.
And that's part of the grooming aspect, right?
It is.
You're sort of slowly building somebody up to something.
Right. And at that point, you don't even know, as a survivor, you don't really know because it's happening so slowly. Right. And then you're in it. And if you have a family and support system, now you have to break down and say, look, I've been doing this. And that makes it so much harder.
Well, thank you for sharing all that, because that's quite a lot, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah,
we're not even running on the edge.
Yeah,
of it,
I just realized I talked for 10 minutes. Good. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's good though. It's very valuable information. So coming back to Radiant Futures, what is it? What's your primary sort of not necessarily your mission, but your goals as to how you actively assist within this realm?
Good question. So, so our vision is to see a world or a community free from violence. And so with that, there's two primary components that we do, within the realm of human trafficking. One is we provide assistance such as shelter, therapy services, legal services, personal empowerment services for survivors. That's one of the things that we do. We've dedicated ourselves. We've been doing that. That's part of what we do for human trafficking survivors. In addition, there is the awareness aspect. And so it's almost two populations we're working with. We work with the survivors of human trafficking, and we work to promote awareness that this is a real issue in the broader community.
Right.
So while a lot of individuals within Orange County may not see the work that we do with human trafficking survivors because they are behind our walls, they are protected, they are in, therapy is one-on-one and private. That stuff is not necessarily seen.
No.
But we have series of events, campaigns, things that educationals, and we work a lot with other nonprofit organizations to train their staff. We also provide 40-hour human trafficking advocacy caseworker training. So for someone to work with human trafficking survivors, the state recommends that they go through human trafficking caseworker advocacy training. So we provide that for organizations across the county. And so about 3 times a year, they come in to our offices, and we train them on how to be successful human trafficking caseworkers. And we do educationals and promotions and events that promote awareness that might have tidbits of statistics. But it's really to say, wow, this is something that, this is a movement that needs to continue the momentum. So the momentum that maybe was brought up through popular culture and in popular media, that brings an inkling of awareness to individuals. Now individuals want to find out more, or what happens at the local level for change. And, people come to us and they volunteer with us, and they can help us, and they can help support the cause of serving survivors.
Now, I understand the promotion of things. Obviously, that makes awareness, builds up a lot of things. And at the very beginning, you mentioned that obviously in an ideal world, it'd be great to prevent it all from happening and what have you. That's a big thing to take on, isn't it? You're in this field, you've studied a lot on it. You're involved with it every day. Where do you think, forget the promotion part, but where do you think part of the prevention can come from? Because I don't know what my neighbor does. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, what does that look like for us?
A big wing of our prevention is, so it's interesting. That's a really good question.
Because we want to fix it. We're not going to fix it today.
Right. But we want to fix it.
We want to fix it.
And prevention, I'll say prevention does start with awareness. There are a lot of people doing the work. So prevention starts with awareness, but then then how do I help prevent is kind of what I'm here saying. You're like, okay, well, prevention, I agree. How do I help prevent? Do I go to a school and tell them, hey, watch out for that stranger who might be human trafficking you? Well, sure, I guess, but the majority of human traffickers are not necessarily strangers, just like the majority of sexual assault.
Right.
People who sexually assault are not strangers. Mm-hmm. So it's being aware of what human trafficking
is about
and what it actually is and what it isn't, and be able to see through, because there's a lot of sensationalism that carries weight in our imaginations. Mm-hmm. So being able to sift through the noise to really understand what the issue is. That's the first
it's like
part.
Being able to sorry for interrupting. So it's almost like, even at a young age, being able to step back for a moment from your particular environment and maybe see if somebody's saying things to you, where does it really lead to, what's being said, things like that, because otherwise you're just going to go with it, and it's a flow, right? You don't know anything different.
Right. And so then, someone like you, for example, or someone who's watching this saying, well, I'm already an adult. My kids are already fully grown. Right. I have grandkids.
Yeah.
I mean, so what, do I tell my children about the horrors about this? Do I tell them to watch out well, sure. You can, but also letting them know that this is an issue that exists, and finding out which organizations locally are actually working with survivors. So Radiant Futures, we are one of many organizations, because it does take a lot of individuals, and knowing. So again, that's the first part, the awareness. The other one is, if prevention is also about shaping the next generation, because I mean, eradication, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over several generations. Mm-hmm. So it's almost a trajectory. We're leaning towards a trajectory where we reduce the numbers of survivors, where we reduce the number of people that are actually falling prey to human traffickers. Also understanding that a lot of that comes from the demand. So the reason why human trafficking, both in labor and in sex trafficking, the reason why it's so prevalent is because the demand is prevalent. Mm-hmm. So what kinds of things are we doing as individuals to teach our kids, or to show our children about the demands of sex, and to show particularly our young men, how do you view sex and how do you approach sex? Mm-hmm. Because it's the demand for sex trafficking that is driving the statistics for sex trafficking.
Sure.
And in labor trafficking, well, the demand for cheap products.
Right.
Right. Well, I want to pay for, and so, if it's
cheap labor, isn't it? That's what you're really looking for, isn't it?
That's exactly. And and as long as the demand is there, the demand will be filled.
So it's very similar to, as you mentioned before, they all fall into the same thing, but it's very similar also to drugs or anything else that's going along, because a lot of it's supply and demand. The more supply there is, the more demand there is, the more supply there's going to be. So on that point, when somebody, maybe you're fortunate enough to land in a country like America, if this was going on to you, what types of things can that person do to get out of whatever situation they're in almost immediately? Because you don't have much time, do you? It's not like you can sit around and wait, go and stand on the corner and wait for me to come and pick you up. What does that look like?
Right. So there are national human trafficking hotlines. There are like our Radiant Futures 24-hour hotline. We call it a helpline. Our Radiant Futures is a helpline because a lot of times
you do a lot of talking to people too, don't you?
Yeah. Right. And we actually recognize that before, when we used to use the word hotline, people think, okay, well, that means, or it has to be hot. Like, I am ready.
Right.
But someone may not be fully ready to leave, but they do have a minute or two, or they have a little bit of time where they can actually make a secret phone call and find out more. What would leaving actually look like?
Right.
So,
will you take my kids? Will you take my dog? Right. When are you now take?
Yeah. Right? Instead of just saying, I need to get out now. Right. Now, we still get that, and we can still accommodate that.
Sure.
But I think it's important for people who think they might be in a human trafficking situation or feel like they might be, or if someone might be, is to call these helplines and say, hey, I have this situation. Consult me through it. What is it that I could do to that? I don't want to take an hour explaining like the different things, a safety plan and how to escape, but they can call any of the numbers, or they can call our helpline at Radiant Futures, which is right on our website at radiantfutures.org. And they can call that number or reach out through us, and we can guide a loved one. We can guide the survivor or someone who cares for a survivor through that process, so they can help them to come out.
And I'm assuming, because everything costs money, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, is there a decent amount of, I'm assuming, funding from the government that assists in yourself and other nonprofits like yours to continue to do these things? Because it's not an easy thing to do, is it?
Did you say sufficient? What was the word you used?
Sufficient? Yeah, I don't think there's a sufficient.
Yeah, sufficient might not be a word. Is there money?
Is there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. There are. So as an organization, we're funded through various different entities. There's county funding, there's state funding, and there's some federal funding. So some of that does happen. It's not sufficient. And a lot of contractual funds are very limited in terms of what you can.
Oh, you have stipulations on them?
What you can do, or they're oh my gosh, I blanked on the word, but they're allocated for certain things. So this you can only do for this you can only do for that, you can only do for that, and the funds are always less than what we need.
Right.
And so that's where supporters from like the North Orange County Chamber and other private supporters come in, and we fill those gaps. And we're really proud to say that like the monies that come from our supporters can go directly to the clients that we're serving, because we do have some of our costs just for maintaining and being run can be covered through some of our contracts. But a lot of the work that we do is also, it comes because people either donate things or donate their time, or donate funds so that we can continue to do the work we do.
Now, we've talked a lot about the terrible negative side of it, of all this. But I'd like to touch a little bit on the positive side and the things that you particularly do yourself at Radiant Futures. You want to walk us through some of those success stories and how things have turned around for these individuals? Yeah.
So one particular story comes to mind, and this is a labor trafficking survivor. And I hope I don't take too long to say the story, so I'll try and leave out a lot of the details. But she was from Afghanistan.
Right.
And this was a few years ago, and she was brought over here. So she was married to Afghanistani nationals who were living here in Orange County. And she was brought over on that marriage visa. So she was in Afghanistan and then was brought over and was here. And as soon as she got here, she came here with her new husband and her husband's parents and the rest of her husband's family, and they lived here in Orange County, wealthy. And she became the person in charge of making sure that everyone's laundry was done and that all the cooking was done. And they would throw parties and they hung out with individuals, and she was in charge. She was cooking, she was cleaning, she was washing, she was doing everything. They did not give her any access to any of her documents, so she couldn't leave the house without supervision. And, they would buy, and she was an indentured servant to her mother-in-law. So her husband, I don't know exactly what he was doing, but she was the servant of the family and the servant of the mother-in-law, was brought here under the pretense of marriages, wanted to escape the situation that she had in Afghanistan, for a better life, and then found herself completely enslaved, and labor and sex, and not just for her husband, but for friends and favors. And this was something that was really unbearable for her. At some point she was at a supermarket or something and overheard and saw some information for a nonprofit. She ended up calling this nonprofit. They redirected her to Radiant Futures. Mm-hmm. And so she contacted us at Radiant Futures. And so over the course of a couple weeks, probably, my timeline's a little phasey, but over the course of a couple weeks, she was able to make her safety plan, get her go bag, and we met her at the police station.
Right.
And once we meet her at the local police station, then we brought her back to Radiant Futures. And then she was in our shelter. We assisted her with the trauma of everything that she's been going through, assisted her with any legal thing. At this point, she had no documents. She had no papers. She went from being legally here to now being here, without any appropriate documentation. Sure. And so going to court. And now she has this life, doesn't know what to do, doesn't know anybody here because she was literally brought over here. Is still learning the language, is still learning the culture. And she was with us in our shelter. She was in our shelter for about 4 or 5 months. Currently she is living in a transitional home. She actually has a job, and she's assisting refugees, and she's assisting other people from the region that have come over and kind of helping them assimilate or understand what it means to live in Orange mm-hmm. County and what it's like.
Who better to talk to? Right.
Right. And so stories like that. And so she's someone that, a lot of us in the agency met and knew personally. So when I talk about her, it brings me hope, mm-hmm. right? That thing is, well, because we got to see that story almost to its fruition.
Right.
But I'll say one more thing.
Sure.
And that a lot of times people get into this line of work because they want to see that endpoint. Mm-hmm. They want to see, oh my gosh, we did it. We helped you get from here to here. And a lot of the reality is, that's an emotional high that we might be able to get from helping. But the reality is we may not necessarily see them get all the way.
Right.
Because that may not be up to us.
Right.
Our role is they are going through.
Well, you're a block, exactly. aren't you? A block of time. And then,
exactly.
And then they go into the real world again and make their own journey.
We are a chapter in their journey.
Yeah, yeah.
This isn't my journey of how many people I help. Mm-hmm. This is their journey of healing and transformation. And we are a chapter in it. Mm-hmm. So when we come across a survivor, we recognize I am chapter 6 mm-hmm. of 30 in mm-hmm. your journey. I want to be this great chapter in your life.
Sure.
And then when they move on to the next chapter, we have faith that the work that we've done with them has helped them. And now they are one step closer towards that healing and transformation. And so on the surface, it may look like, well, their life, there was chaos and destruction level 10, and now there's chaos and destruction level 3. Where's the change? Well, the change was in that reduction.
Right.
And so really being able to believe that the work that we're doing is helping them, even if we don't get to be the ones to see the end result, someone else will.
Right.
Because there are people who have had 16 chapters before them And then we get the final chapter where we actually see it. And that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But we get individuals, I mean, because we serve survivors, especially, irregardless of how long ago it was.
Sure.
Some people were trafficked 10 years ago, have been trying to find some resources and now are coming to us for therapy, for example. But they've already secured their own housing. They've already secured a job. They've already secured employment, but they still need therapy. It's like, okay, well, we're assisting. And so that's where the value comes in, where we see that we are part of someone's healing journey.
Now, I'm sorry to circle back, but it was crossing my mind a little bit because it's quite a big deal. Well, I feel it's quite a big deal, is when you were mentioning kids or young ones in the foster programming and so on and so forth. That is domestically.
Mm-hmm.
What can regular people do or help with that? Because that is a whole different ball game. And, there's been a lot of controversy recently about who's responsible for what. But, what can we really do? Magic one-time type deal,
Yeah. My answer, and I'll say it's my answer, is a lot of the work to help foster youth is more severely underfunded than the work in to help human trafficking survivors. So there are programs that are there, and there are wonderful organizations out in Orange County and across the nation, really, but in Orange County specifically, that work with foster youth and specifically work with foster youth who have aged out of the foster care system.
Sure.
So they're called TAY, is what the transitional age youth, typically ages 18 to 25. It's prevention work. So it's if somebody is about to exit the foster care system, what kind of supports do they have in place? Because remember, they become high risk because of the lack of support, because of the lack of stability, because of the lack of therapy, because of the lack of being able to process these things, because of not being able to find housing, etc.
Well, in the outside world, it almost looks like you reach a certain age, that's it. When the rest of us, usually mum and dad's still there, you could go back, or I mean? Like,
on paper,
you're on your own.
Right. I mean, I have a son that's going to turn 18 in February. So on paper, he's legal, all the legal rights and responsibilities, but
he has a problem. He gets to pick up the phone and speak to mum and dad.
Right. And, he's not losing his housing in February. I'll tell you that. Right. But foster youth do.
And people don't realize that. I think it's just suddenly this young individual is just like, oh, go figure it out now. And they haven't really had the best track of...
of being able to figure it out and of having the supports needed. So what can someone do to prevent, especially for the foster youth? Honestly, I would say fund those programs. Find those organizations that who have a mission that you can rely on and that you trust and that you feel tugged at your heart. And donate through them to those youth, because they work on making sure that these youth to lower the risk so that they don't enter the scenario where they become survivors of human trafficking,
which is part of the prevention.
Yeah.
I like that.
So that's how we do that.
That's good. Now, obviously we're here for a reason. We're going to talk about January the 25th. We've talked about promotion and obviously Radiant Future. This is like your second year now that you've done the 5K run, or I'm not quite sure what they call it.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're calling it a dynamic duo 5K run. And the reason, and so, I'll say, so it's our second one. Last year was our inaugural 5K. 5Ks are great ways to bring awareness. People enjoy waking up on a Saturday morning. Some people enjoy waking up on a Saturday morning, running / walking / playing around with a 5K. Dynamic duo last year, we had, people to dress up in costume. We had like Mario and Luigi. We had Batman and Robin. We had a team dress up as the Golden Girls. And so there was like 4 of them and they came. And there are community booths that come and talk about the services that they provide. We have educational pamphlets, and again, it is part of raising awareness, but it is also a fundraiser. So with the monies that we raise from our 5K, then we can turn around and use that money to help survivors. And last year, because it was our first year, we didn't know what to expect. And
sure.
It was fantastic. And it's in Fountain Valley, and it's at this park, Mild Square Park, which is a certified race course. So I don't know if you knew this, but there are some people races get timed, and there are certain races that in order to qualify for them, you have to meet certain criteria. You
Sure.
have to, or you have to demonstrate that you ran in X number of races before you can participate in this one. People also like to measure the time as health, personal improvement goals. And so it's a certified course. It's certified where your time becomes certified and legitimate by the governing board of races. I can't tell you who it's certified by, but it's an actual course. So it's been designated as a course where people can run official races.
Oh.
So if that's what you're into, then that's great. So when we had it last year, there's like our group, there's a couple hundred people, a few hundred people. There's like the group of elite professional runners who do this amazingly, right? And they run it in, I don't know, 25 minutes, 22 minutes, ridiculous, amazing.
Yeah.
And then there's like a middle group of people who are, kind of running enthusiasts.
Yeah. Right.
And then there's a group of people who go for fun.
Bimble around, right.
And having all of those is fantastic. We have grandparents go with their grandchildren. We have people who have never ran a 5K before, try it, end up walking the second half of it. And people who just go to walk it and to have a great time. So it's open to all individuals. I fall in the middle section.
Oh, wow.
So I do run, but I'm not an elite runner.
Right.
So it is a lot of fun. I'll be there. Most Radiant Future staff will be there. Hopefully you can join us.
Well, if it's like Disneyland where you can hire one of them scooters, I'll be all on it. I'll be all over it. Yeah, I'm in that category. It's a Saturday and I'm not going to, I don't want to do too much. I'm exhausted. Yeah. So to sign up for this, they go to your website, radiantfutures.org.
Yes, radiantfutures.org. And then there's an events sub page and it says it's our 5K right there. There's also sponsorships available if someone feels like, well, I want to do more than just sign myself up, or I'm not going to sign myself up, but I want to
gift something. Right.
I want to be a part of the movement. And again, it's someone is not giving to Radiant Futures.
Right.
You're giving through Radiant Futures for the survivors, for the people that we serve. And so that's what the 5K does. Yeah. So it's January 25th. Signups are probably up until the week of.
Right.
So, if someone is just thinking about it, but radiantfutures.org, best place to go.
And then I'm assuming, because you sort of mentioned it, so there's like little booths. People have like little tented things and tables. Is there a bit of food, maybe a little bit of music?
Yes, there's food. You have to complete the 5K to get food. No, I'm just joking. Who came last year? I think Chick-fil-A was out there.
Nice.
Some other organization, I can't remember exactly who, but yes, like food vendors. Not vendors, because everything is
donated.
Donated, but people,
the
food,
donors, right?
Yeah, food will come. Other nonprofits who work with other populations, other at-risk populations come out. A lot of our partners, our nonprofit partners, come out and set up tables to provide information about their services, and local folks. But yeah, so there's booth, there's food. Yeah, it's early. It's like 7 a.m. It's probably over by 10:30. You can probably get back home and still find people sleeping in your home.
I wouldn't have even got up.
See, so you would be the one that would still be. What'd you do today? I
just woke up.
Yeah, I was like, I went to Fountain Valley and ran 5 kilometers, ate some Chick-fil-A and came back. Yeah. I mean, like that's
amazing.
But it is a wonderful time. And last year the weather was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a good time of year actually. It's not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not too bad because of the fires right now.
That really does change a lot of things, and our hearts go out to everyone who's affected by the fires. And Orange County is a little removed from it, but we know that especially over time, it's going to start affecting us here.
You could smell the smoke today, and you could see the clouds this morning. So it's starting to move back in now, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. But
But at least we're not on fire. So that's a wholly different matter there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving out of the promotion part and everything we're doing, or everything you guys are doing, we always give our guests time to mention something, whether, we forgot to talk about it, whether elaborate on it, or maybe you got a final message for anyone. So do you, the mic's yours.
Wow. Okay. So in terms of anything that we missed, I can't necessarily think of anything right off the bat. But I will just end by saying again that, all of the work that we do is not really possible without the support we get from local government, state government, federal government, and our supporters. And a lot of us choose the work we do, just like survivors have a story and we're just a chapter in it. We also all have stories. And this is not just for people who work in domestic violence and human trafficking.
Sure.
But we all have stories and we all have journeys. And some of us, it might be the chapter in our lives where it's our time to want to give and to learn more. Or some people might be, you know what? I feel like my calling is to work with human trafficking survivors. My calling is to get more involved. I don't want to just give money. I don't want to just watch a podcast. I don't want to just text here. I want to be more involved. And so we welcome that. Human trafficking awareness is more than just, letting people know about things, but it's a movement. It's a movement against human trafficking. And the movement has evolved over the years and it's growing, and we want to keep the momentum alive in the movement, and we want to welcome people to come and join us in the movement. The movement is slow and it's work, and sometimes it doesn't feel like there's progress, but there always is. So if anyone wants to be a part of the human trafficking movement, give us a call. We'll give you a tour. We'll spend more one-on-one time about what it means, because if you want to be part of the movement, we definitely want more soldiers in it.
I like what you had to say there, and in fact, it raised a question in my mind, because I know it's not a case of, if you want to volunteer for your local Boys and Girls Club, you can just volunteer and do it. If you're helping with organizations like yours, there's a little bit more to it. How do people start on that journey if they're thinking of actually wishing to be a volunteer or wishing to choose an organization to help?
So once someone has made the decision, it is a little more than just,
getting up and working there the next day, right?
Sandwiches.
Yeah.
Because we work, because the issues are complex.
Mm-hmm.
So how do they start? Let me answer your question. They can call our helpline.
Right.
Or email us at info@radiantfutures.org, and they can find that information on our website as well, and say, hey, I'm interested in learning more and possibly volunteering.
Right.
And then that'll start with a conversation. Someone will reach out to them and get an idea for the kind of level of commitment that they actually can do. Because a lot of us will get really passionate. We're like, I want to commit 16 hours, and that's great, but is that feasible, really?
Right.
Because we don't want
fit into your life.
Yeah, we don't want anyone to burn out.
Right,
really,
right.
We want people for the long haul. So they're like, you know what? I can probably commit a couple hours a month. Okay, great. Come see our place, see what it's about. Let's find out where we can fit you. But it always starts with seeing our place, seeing what it looks like. What does a human trafficking center actually look like? I don't know if people know. I don't know what happens in people's imagination when you think of this as an agency that serves human trafficking survivors. Like, what's going on in their minds?
That's true.
Does it look like a row of cots? Does it look like a jail?
Yeah.
Our shelter is an apartment complex. You can't tell it from the next one.
No, you can't.
And what does our center actually look like? Well, I mean, you've seen it, but like, there's this idea of what it actually is. So really coming and juxtaposing our own imagination of what it is to what it actually looks like,
sure,
I think is very eye-opening for a lot of individuals. So that would always be the first step.
Yeah.
And then once they're there, then they can really start to see, how do I see myself in this place? So that would be the first step, is reaching out, info@radiantfutures.org, or calling our helpline and saying, I want to volunteer, and we will reach back out.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Nefta, thank you so very much for coming on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you all for listening and watching. And if you'd like more information, please visit radiantfutures.org. It's all on there, and you can reach out to them. And, I would love to have you actually back onto our podcast, because obviously today's more about the Awareness Month, and we'll learn more about you in an upcoming episode.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.